There are places in the Appalachian Mountains that don't stay on maps, and once they notice you, they don't forget.
They don't put it on maps. People think the Appalachian Mountains are old. That's the lie that makes them comfortable. They're not old. They're worn down, like something that's been clawed at for a very long time. I grew up in eastern Kentucky, where the mountains lean so close together they block the sky. Out there, the woods don't feel empty. They feel occupied. And everyone knows there are places you don't go, even if you can't explain why. Nobody ever points them out. They just say things like, "That way ain't right," or "You don't need to be walking up there." When I was 19, I decided I didn't believe any of it. I was studying environmental science, home from college for the summer, and I wanted to map abandoned mining roads for a project. Old satellite photos showed a stretch of forest with no labels, no trails, no service roads, just a blank patch swallowed by green. That should have been my first warning. The second warning came when my grandfather saw the map. He didn't get angry, he didn't laugh, he just stared at it for a long time and said, "Those hills don't want to be remembered." I went anyway. The deeper I drove, the worse my GPS behaved. The screen spun, froze, then showed me parked in the middle of a lake that didn't exist. My radio cut to static. Then, just for a second, I heard voices like a crowd whispering from very far away. I shut it off. The road ended at a rusted gate bent backward, like something had forced its way out. Beyond it was a dirt path barely wide enough for a truck, swallowed by trees that grew too close together. Their trunks twisted inward as if they were listening to each other. The woods went quiet the moment I stepped out. No birds, no insects, not even wind. I walked for nearly an hour before I noticed something was wrong with the ground. There were footprints. Not mine. They were barefoot, too long, toes pressed too deep into the dirt, like the thing that made them was heavier than it should have been. And they didn't follow the path. They circled it. That's when I heard my name. Not shouted, not whispered, spoken casually, like someone standing just behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I told myself it was my imagination until it happened again. Same voice, same tone. This time closer. It sounded like me, but wrong in the way a bad recording sounds wrong. I left the path. I don't remember deciding to. I remember realizing I had. The trees grew closer the farther I walked. Their branches tangled overhead until the daylight dimmed into something green and sickly. Then I saw the structure. It wasn't a cabin. It was a house, half sunk into the mountain itself, like it had been swallowed and slowly digested. The wood was gray and soft, carved with symbols I didn't recognize, but somehow understood were warnings. The door was open. Inside, the air smelled like wet stone and old blood. The walls were covered in carvings, hundreds of them, each one a name. Some were scratched out violently. Others had lines drawn through them like tallies. And at the far end of the room was a mirror. Except it wasn't reflecting the room. It was reflecting the woods. And something was standing behind my reflection. I ran. I don't remember the path back, only the sound of footsteps matching mine, perfectly synchronized. Whenever I slowed, they slowed. Whenever I stopped, they stopped. I made it to my truck as the sun dipped below the ridgeline. The engine wouldn't start. That's when I heard them clearly, dozens of voices speaking in unison, rising from the trees, from the ground, from inside my own head. "You saw us. You remembered. Now you carry us." The headlights turned on themselves. In front of the truck, blocking the road, stood a line of figures shaped like people, but unfinished. Faces stretched too wide, limbs bent wrong, eyes reflecting my lights like animal glass. One of 'em stepped forward. It smiled with my mouth. I woke up on the side of the highway at dawn. No truck, no map, no phone. The police said I was dehydrated and confused. They told me I'd wandered onto private land and gotten lost. But here's the thing. When I got home, my grandfather was waiting for me. He hugged me and whispered, "I'm sorry they noticed you." I asked him what they were. He shook his head. He said, "They ain't things. They're what's left of the people who didn't listen." Sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps outside my window, perfectly matching my own as I pace the room. And when I look in the mirror, the woods are still there behind me, waiting.
The mountain that answers back. If you ever hear someone calling your name in the Appalachian Mountains, there's one rule you're supposed to follow. You don't answer. Not out loud, not in your head, not even by turning around, because if it calls you twice, it's learning your voice. And if it calls you a third time, it doesn't need you anymore. I didn't know that rule when I moved to a town so small it barely existed on paper. No cell service, one gas station, one diner, the kind of place where the mountains feel close enough to lean over your shoulder and breathe. The locals were polite, but careful. They never asked why I'd moved there. They never asked where I went hiking. They only ever asked one question. Did the mountain talk to you yet? I laughed the first time someone said it. No one else did. The trail I chose wasn't marked. It wasn't unmarked either. It just sort of stopped being acknowledged. The dirt was packed flat like it had been walked on for centuries, but there were no signs, no blazes, no trash. Even the trees grew differently there, bent inward like they were hiding something in the center. About an hour in, the forest went quiet. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. They weren't rushed. They weren't sneaky. They sounded like someone walking who knew I couldn't see them. I stopped. So did they. I turned. Nothing there. Then a voice came from the trees to my left, my voice, perfectly copied, saying my own name the way my mother used to when I was a kid. I didn't answer. The woods exhaled. I kept walking until I reached a clearing I hadn't seen on the map. In the center stood a pile of stones, stacked into a rough circle, each one etched with shallow handprints. Some were adult-sized, some weren't. The air there felt heavier, like gravity had been turned up just a little too high. That's when the mountain spoke again. Not from one direction, from everywhere. It didn't shout, it didn't whisper. It asked questions. Why did you come? What are you missing? Who would notice if you didn't leave? The questions slid into my head, fully formed, wrapped in memories that weren't mine. Miners trapped underground, children lost in the fog, voices screaming until the mountain learned how to scream back. I felt my mouth start to move. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. The third call came at sunset. It sounded like someone I loved. That was the mistake. I answered, just one word. What? The forest leaned in. The trees creaked like joints bending the wrong way, and the ground beneath my feet shifted, angling downward as if the mountain were opening its mouth. Faces pressed out of the bark, half-formed, screaming silently, frozen in the moment they'd realized they'd been heard. The voice smiled. Good, it said. Now we don't have to remember you. I woke up at the trailhead the next morning. My boots were filled with dirt that wasn't dirt. It was crushed stone, ancient and warm. The soles were worn thin, like I'd walked for days. Back in town, The diner was closed. The gas station was boarded up. The place looked abandoned. A faded welcome sign stood crooked by the road. Under the town name, someone had carved new words into the wood. Population, same as it's always been. Sometimes, when it's quiet enough, I hear the mountain calling, not my name, but questions, and I know, someday, I'm going to answer again.
The place the mountain remembers. People who grow up in the Appalachian Mountains learn early that the land isn't empty. It's quiet, yes, but quiet in the way a room feels when someone else is already there. Most folks don't question it. You learn which roads fade out, which trails don't show up on maps, and which directions older people avoid without ever explaining why. They don't call these places dangerous. They just say, that spot don't stay put. I didn't understand what that meant until the summer I took a job documenting historical sites in the region. My task was simple: hike, photograph, record coordinates, and move on. No folklore, no ghost stories, just data. That's why the clearing caught my attention. It appeared where my map showed nothing. No trail, no structure, no note of any kind. The trees around it formed a nearly perfect circle, their branches leaning inward like they were drawn toward the center. The air felt oddly still, as if the wind had decided to stop there and nowhere else. In the middle stood several upright stones. Not markers, not monuments, just smooth slabs arranged deliberately, all facing inward. Every single one was blank. I felt an odd sense of familiarity, like I'd seen the place before in a dream I couldn't fully remember. I took photos, wrote down coordinates, and left earlier than planned. The longer I stayed, the stronger the feeling became, like lingering would somehow make the place harder to leave. That night, I noticed something strange. My GPS timeline showed I'd stopped at that location for nearly 3 hours. I was certain I hadn't. My photos told a similar story. The timestamps were inconsistent. Some showed minutes between shots, others showed gaps of over an hour. Each image looked the same, but the light subtly changed, like time was moving differently depending on where I stood. I told myself it was a glitch. I didn't sleep well. The next morning, I mentioned the clearing to a local shop owner while grabbing coffee. The second I described the stones, her expression changed. She asked me where it was. When I showed her the coordinates, she didn't look surprised. "That place shows up now and then," she said carefully, "usually for people who are paying attention." She explained that some spots in the mountains weren't fixed, not in the way roads or buildings were. They appeared when conditions were right, when someone was receptive. "They don't trap you," she added. "They just remember you." A week passed before I went back. I told myself it was for documentation, for clarity, for proof that the place hadn't changed. But when I reached the clearing, I knew immediately that it had. There were more stones now, still blank, still smooth, except for one. It had a date etched into it, that day's date. The forest was quiet again. No birds, no insects, no distant sounds. I felt a strange pull to stand in the center of the stones, like that was where I belonged. The longer I stayed, the more familiar everything felt, as if the clearing had been waiting for me to return. Then I sensed movement behind me. Not footsteps, not approach, just presence. I didn't turn around. Something told me that noticing it was the real mistake. When I finally left, my phone exploded with notifications, missed messages, missed calls, concerned voicemails. According to everyone else, I'd been unreachable for almost 4 days. To me, it had been an afternoon. I quit the job soon after. But even now, when I look at satellite images or old maps, I sometimes spot a small gap where the forest doesn't quite line up, a place without a name, without a label. And every time I notice it, I get the feeling that something else has noticed me too. Not urgently, not aggressively, just patiently, like it remembers me and is waiting for me to remember it back.